They sold my daughter's future while she was still sleeping upstairs. By the time she came down for breakfast, her music studio was already rubble, not cleared, not relocated, erased. I found the contract on the kitchen island next to a crystal flute stained with lipstick and celebration. My father's signature slashed across the bottom of the page like a verdict already delivered. $210,000. That was the number they chose, the number they decided her dreams were worth. Outside, the sound of hydraulic drills chewed through the west wing of the estate. The vibration traveled through the marble floors and up my spine, like a warning I should have recognized years ago. My younger brother, Adrian, stood on the terrace filming the demolition with his phone held high, narrating to thousands of strangers, in a tone usually reserved for vacation sunsets. "Big transformation day," he said into the camera. "Out with the old, in with the future." The future. Apparently, my daughter wasn't part of it. 12-year-old Maya stepped into the doorway behind me, still wearing her oversized sleep shirt. Her hair was tangled. Her eyes were heavy with trust that had not yet learned how fragile it was. "Mom, why is it so loud?" I couldn't answer immediately. Words require oxygen. In that moment, the house felt like it had sucked all the air out of my lungs. I took her hand and led her toward the back windows. The view that met us was surgical in its brutality. The small recording studio she had spent 3 years building, painting acoustic panels herself, saving allowance money for secondhand equipment, was being ripped open like a wound that no one intended to close. A construction foreman waved casually as if we were watching landscaping. Maya didn't cry. She just stared. Children raised in old houses learn quickly how to read silence. "I thought Grandpa promised I could keep it," she said finally. So did I. 6 months earlier, my grandmother, Sophia, had legally designated that wing as a protected cultural workspace in Maya's name. She had believed in legacy the way other people believed in stocks. To her, art was an inheritance that needed guardians, not investors. But to my parents, legacy was just another asset waiting to be liquidated. They had sold the studio equipment, the acoustic design rights, even the antique upright piano that had belonged to my great-grandfather. All bundled neatly into a private real estate expansion deal. Because my brother wanted an indoor sports complex. Because prestige photographs better than preservation. I closed the contract folder and felt something inside me settle into a colder, sharper shape. For years, I had been the quiet mechanism keeping their empire functional. Not emotionally, legally. I was a structural compliance analyst for historic estates, the one who navigated zoning loopholes and cultural preservation statutes, the one who ensured this sprawling coastal property qualified for a rare municipal designation that reduced its annual tax burden by nearly $50,000. They introduced me at parties as the organized one. They meant I was convenient. While Adrian launched brand partnerships funded by family credit lines, and my parents hosted charity galas under chandeliers I helped legally preserve, I worked behind the scenes filing reports that kept their illusion intact. Being useful had always been my survival strategy. When affection is rationed in childhood, you learn to earn your place with competence. You become indispensable, invisible. I walked Maya back to the car before the dust could settle on her skin. The engine was still warm from our early morning drive. Inside the glove compartment lay my tablet, my professional access codes, my quiet leverage. The estate's preservation status wasn't permanent. It depended on annual compliance audits verifying that historically designated structures remained untouched. The West Wing had just been gutted with a crane. I logged into the municipal portal. No hacking required. I was the authorized liaison. The form asked a simple question. Have any protected features been structurally altered? I selected yes. Attached photographs I had taken seconds earlier, submitted the violation notice. A confirmation window appeared almost immediately. Preservation exemption suspended pending investigation. Their financial reality had just shifted by tens of thousands of dollars a year. Not revenge, documentation. My phone began vibrating across the console like an insect desperate to escape. Mother. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice arrived smooth and condescending, wrapped in the same tone she used to correct waiters in expensive restaurants. "You're overreacting," she said. It was only a hobby room. We're upgrading the property for the family's future. Only a hobby. I glanced at Maya sitting beside me, hands folded in her lap like she was trying to hold something invisible together. Then I ended the call. Silence inside the car felt cleaner than anything in that house. I opened my banking app. Last week, I had quietly transferred $30,000 toward Adrian's grand opening event, a favor disguised as loyalty. There was one final installment scheduled. I canceled it. The notification glowed in the dim interior. Payment revoked. For the first time in my life, withdrawing support felt less like betrayal and more like oxygen. Behind us, machines continued tearing through plaster and memory. Ahead of us stretched a road I had spent decades avoiding, one that required confrontation instead of endurance. I studied my reflection in the rearview mirror. A woman in a worn blazer bought from a consignment shop. A professional who saved elite families millions while living modestly enough to remain non-threatening. My entire identity had been built on making other people comfortable, until they targeted my child. That was the miscalculation, because survival strategies collapse when instinct takes over, and motherhood is an instinct no entitlement can negotiate with. My tablet chimed softly. An automated email from the municipal registry confirmed that a full structural audit of the estate would begin within 48 hours. Inspectors would have legal authority to review financial records tied to the renovation. My parents believed they had simply redesigned a room. In reality, they had triggered a chain reaction that could unravel the legal foundation of everything they owned. I started the car and pulled away from the estate gates just as Adrian's laughter echoed across the courtyard. He thought he was filming content. He was documenting evidence. Maya finally spoke as the coastline disappeared in the rearview mirror. "Are we going back?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Yes," I said quietly. "But next time, it won't be as guests." The sun rose behind us, turning the glass facade of the house into a glowing monument to denial. For 35 years, I had lived in the margins of that place, useful enough to be kept, invisible enough to be forgotten. Today they had demolished more than a studio. They had demolished the version of me that kept their world stable, and as the city skyline came into view, I realized something that felt almost frightening in its clarity. They believed they had taken everything that mattered. They had no idea they had just given me the reason to dismantle their entire kingdom. The letter arrived before sunrise. Not an email, not a warning call. An official municipal notice stamped in dark blue ink and delivered by courier, like a diagnosis no one could postpone. I was making coffee in the small rental kitchen Maya and I had moved into overnight when my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "What did you do?" No greeting, no denial, just panic trying to sound authoritative. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the scanned document the courier had just uploaded to my professional portal. Emergency Compliance Inspection. Heritage status under suspension. The words were clinical, precise, lethal. Within hours, inspectors would arrive at the estate to review structural violations, financial disclosures, and preservation obligations tied to the West Wing. My parents had always believed status was permanent. They were about to learn it was conditional. Maya sat at the tiny dining table, sketching quietly in a notebook she had rescued from the demolition. She didn't ask what the message meant. She had already begun adjusting to a world where adults broke promises. "I can practice in headphones," she said softly. "I won't bother the neighbors." Her calmness cut deeper than tears ever could. "No," I told her. "You're not the one who needs to shrink." At 9 sharp, my phone erupted with calls from extended relatives who had suddenly remembered I existed. My aunt wanted reassurance. My cousin wanted gossip. My brother wanted damage control. Apparently, the suspension notice had been forwarded through every social circle my parents had spent decades cultivating. Luxury communities thrive on discretion. Nothing spreads faster than scandal. I ignored them all and drove toward the municipal office overlooking the harbor. The building was gray and functional, the opposite of the estate's curated elegance. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed like quiet judgment. I met with Daniel Reyes, the lead compliance officer assigned to the case. He had a reputation for treating preservation law like a personal religion. He shook my hand firmly. "You understand the implications," he said. I do, I replied. He opened a thick folder filled with property maps, trust agreements, and photographs already circulating online, including Adrian's demolition video, now reposted by architecture forums, questioning the legality of the renovation. Once heritage designation is compromised, Daniel continued, tax exemptions can be revoked retroactively. Fines follow. Potential civil liability. Sometimes criminal charges if protected assets were sold unlawfully. The words landed like falling stones. Not shocking, just inevitable. I had spent my career warning other families about this exact scenario. I never imagined I would become the case study. By noon, inspectors had sealed the West Wing. Construction crews were ordered to halt immediately. Yellow legal tape replaced the velvet ropes my parents used for private tours. The estate's illusion of invincibility was beginning to crack in daylight. My mother finally reached me in the afternoon. Her voice was no longer polished. "This is going too far," she said. "You've embarrassed us." Embarrassment. That was her greatest fear, not betrayal, not theft, optics. "You destroyed a protected structure," I answered. "I filed a factual report." "You're punishing your own family," she insisted. "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting my child." There was silence on the line, not reflective, just stunned. My father took over the call, his tone switching between anger and negotiation like a malfunctioning machine. "We can fix this," he said. "We'll compensate Maya, buy her better equipment." Better. As if Legacy had an upgrade package. I ended the conversation without another word. That evening, local news outlets began running short segments about a potential preservation breach at one of the city's most recognizable historic properties. No names yet, just speculation. But speculation is enough to make investors nervous. My tablet chimed again, a new message from Daniel. Preliminary financial review suggests unauthorized liquidation of protected cultural assets. Full audit required. I stared at the screen while the city lights flickered on outside our rental window. My parents hadn't just demolished a room. They had sold instruments and archival materials tied to a registered heritage trust established by my grandmother decades earlier. The implications stretched far beyond tax penalties. Trust violations can unravel ownership rights entirely. For the first time, I felt something like grief pressing against the edges of my resolve. Not for them. For the years I had spent maintaining a structure built on selective loyalty. Maya brought me a cup of tea she had made herself. "Are you scared?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I admitted, "but not of them anymore." She nodded, as if fear were simply another problem that could be solved with enough patience. Across town, my brother was live streaming again, this time from the driveway of the estate, assuring viewers that the renovation misunderstanding would be resolved soon. His confidence sounded rehearsed, desperate. He still believed influence could rewrite facts. He didn't understand that once legal processes begin, reputation becomes evidence. At midnight, an official summons appeared in my inbox. A heritage trust attorney, representing the original terms of my grandmother's agreement, requested my presence at an emergency review hearing scheduled for Saturday evening. Location, the estate itself. The irony felt almost theatrical. The same house that had erased my daughter's sanctuary would now host the first public unraveling of its own myth. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet. For decades, I had navigated life like a background character, stabilizing crises, absorbing blame, keeping peace. Now the narrative had shifted, not because I wanted revenge, because truth had finally been documented. Outside, sirens echoed faintly along the waterfront. Inside, Maya fell asleep on the couch with her headphones still on, composing music no one could demolish. I watched her breathe and understood something with startling certainty. My parents believed this was a temporary storm, a scandal that could be managed with enough charm and money. They were wrong. The audit wasn't just investigating a building. It was excavating decades of entitlement buried beneath polished floors and curated smiles. And by Saturday night, the foundation of their entire world would be standing in open court, whether they were ready or not. The invitation of rain wrapped in gold, embossed lettering, velvet ribbon, a performance of elegance that almost made me laugh. Grand opening, the Ashford Family Sports Pavilion. Saturday, 7 p.m., formal attire. My mother had added a handwritten note at the bottom. Let's be civilized. Don't create a scene. I read it twice, then placed the card on the kitchen table beside the legal summons that had been delivered an hour earlier. Same time, same place. Two events scheduled for the same evening, one built on denial, the other on documentation. By the time Maya and I drove through the estate gates that Saturday, the property was glowing like a staged illusion. String lights draped the oak trees. Valets hurried between luxury cars. Music floated across manicured lawns as if nothing had happened. Appearances are powerful currency in families like mine. They spend it recklessly. Inside, guests clustered around champagne towers and polished marble counters, speaking in hushed tones that stopped the moment I entered. Scandal travels faster than invitations. Adrian stood near the entrance to the new sports pavilion, dressed in a tailored suit and a confidence that looked thinner than it used to. His phone was still in his hand, always recording, always performing. "Glad you made it," he said. "You'll see. Everything's under control." I didn't answer. Maya stayed close beside me, her small fingers curled around mine like a quiet promise that this time we wouldn't leave unfinished. My father climbed onto a low stage positioned in front of the glass doors leading into the pavilion. He raised a crystal glass and waited for the room to settle into attentive silence. "This new wing represents our commitment to progress," he began, "a space for the next generation to grow, compete, and thrive." The irony was almost poetic, because at that exact moment the front doors opened again, not for late guests, for the legal delegation. 3 officials stepped inside with the calm authority of people who didn't need applause. Behind them walked Elena, my grandmother, her posture straight despite the cane in her hand, her expression carved from decades of watching her own legacy misunderstood. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. My father's smile froze like glass under sudden frost. Daniel Reyes moved forward first, holding a folder thick enough to silence an entire room. "Mr. Ashford," he said evenly, "we're here to serve notice regarding the breach of the Sophia Heritage Trust." The words rippled through the crowd like an electrical current. My mother set her champagne down too quickly. The sound of crystal against marble cracked the stillness. "This is inappropriate," she snapped. "We're hosting a private event." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "Heritage law supersedes private gatherings." My grandmother stepped forward next. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She simply spoke with the clarity of someone who had already mourned what was lost. "When I established this trust," she said, "I granted conditional stewardship of this estate. Not ownership, not entitlement, stewardship." Guests leaned closer, drawn by the gravity of truth finally spoken aloud. "By demolishing protected cultural structures and liquidating registered assets," she continued, "you triggered the dissolution clause, effective immediately." My father's hand trembled around his glass. "That's absurd," he insisted. "We improved the property." "You improved your comfort," Elena replied calmly, "in a house you were only ever meant to safeguard." The silence that followed felt physical, heavy enough to press against the ribs. Daniel opened the folder and began reading the formal notice. Tax exemptions revoked retroactively. Civil penalties pending. Mandatory restitution for unlawfully sold heritage materials. A 60-day deadline to vacate pending trust reassignment. Each sentence dismantled another piece of the image my parents had spent decades constructing. Across the room, Adrian stared at his phone as notifications flooded in faster than he could process them. News outlets had picked up the story. His live stream audience was no longer cheering. They were questioning, condemning. Reputation, once his greatest asset, was collapsing in real time. The party ended without anyone announcing it. Guests began drifting toward the exits, murmuring polite excuses that sounded hollow even to themselves. In elite circles, proximity to scandal is contagious. Within minutes, the pavilion stood nearly empty, a monument to ambition built on borrowed legitimacy. My mother looked at me then, not with anger, with disbelief. You've ruined us, she whispered. I considered the accusation carefully. No, I said. You did that when you decided legacy was negotiable. Outside, the night air felt cooler, cleaner. Emergency floodlights had replaced the decorative lanterns along the driveway. Legal vehicles idled where sports cars had parked earlier. The transformation was swift, unavoidable. In the weeks that followed, the unraveling accelerated. Luxury memberships canceled. Investment partners withdrew quietly. The buyers who had purchased my daughter's instruments returned them after learning they were tied to protected trust property. Within 2 months, my parents moved into a modest apartment overlooking a highway instead of an ocean. The estate itself fell silent for the first time in decades. When Maya and I finally walked through its front doors again, the absence of performance was almost sacred. No construction noise, no rehearsed laughter, just the faint scent of polished wood and history waiting to be respected. We spent the first days dismantling the sports pavilion, removing bleachers, taking down banners, restoring the West Wing one careful step at a time. When the rebuilt studio welcomed its first note of music, it sounded different, stronger, unapologetic. I sat at a desk in the restored archive room, scrolling through the last unread messages in the family group chat. Apologies disguised as excuses, requests disguised as reconciliation. For most of my life, I had believed maintaining peace was my responsibility. Now I understood peace isn't built on silence, it's built on boundaries. I blocked their numbers and set the phone down. Across the room, Maya composed a melody that rose through the open windows and into the evening light. They had tried to sell her voice to build their future. Instead, they had forced me to reclaim ours. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, golden light settled across shelves filled with preserved stories. The house no longer felt like a stage set for other people's ambitions. It felt like what it had always been meant to be, a sanctuary. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter keeping someone else's illusion alive. I was the guardian of a truth no one could demolish again.